This was a week for taking sides. Even if you were indifferent going into it, it was hard to avoid it. You may have turned the TV off right in the middle, but it only made things more unbelievable when you turned the TV back on. By then, it seemed like everyone had taken sides. And how could you not? It was the most amazing comeback in Super Bowl history. The only overtime ever played in the Super Bowl, and Tom Brady, either hero or villain, now has more Super Bowl championships as a starting quarterback than anyone in the 51-year history of the game. Of course, it was just a game. It has no meaning other than bragging rights among sports fans and serves the purpose of Sunday evening entertainment, nothing more. Nonetheless, a lot of people seem to be passionately taking sides this week. I'm with Brady. I'm with Maddie. Best of all, if you aren't happy with the results, they're going to do it again next year. The biggest problem that the Apostle Paul had to address in the church of Corinth was they were taking sides. The early chapters tell us that some followed Paul, and some followed Apollos, and some followed Cephas, and others claimed to be the true followers of Christ. They divided themselves into teams, and if you didn't like it, you could go join another team, all in the same church. Reminds me of the story I first heard in a church when I was serving in church in Alabama. Someone told of driving down Church Street in a local town they were visiting, and there was the Church of God. And next, there was the true Church of God. And then the holy, true Church of God. And finally, at the end of the street, there was the one and only holy, true Church of God. When asked, a local person explained the obvious. The people in that church just could not get along. Every time there was a disagreement, they chose sides, and someone starts another church. Paul told the Christians in Corinth the obvious. Their divisions, their infighting, their taking up sides were signs of spiritual immaturity. What they mistook for being part of the elite, the spiritually advanced Christians, was simply proof that they were following human inclinations and fighting like little children. They complained that Paul did not teach an advanced Christianity, and his response was they could not handle it. Some of the dangers in the church today are the same as Paul's church members. We can choose sides, thinking that we are on the side of those who are more advanced, more spiritual, more capable of producing growth in the church, more like Jesus than the others, or we can humbly recognize that God gives the growth. We are simply servants who are called to set aside our differences and work together for the greater good of the community of faith. After all, according to Paul, that is when God is most likely to give the growth. Paul imagines the church as a group of farm workers out in the field. Everyone has work to do, but no one can do it all. Some plant, others water, but God gives the growth. When we embrace our role as one of the servants of God, working together with others, much can be accomplished. When we choose teams and take off in different directions, we may call ourselves the one and only holy, true church of God, but everyone who drives down the street knows the difference. I remember a few years ago during a mission trip, one of the leaders that had been assigned to us from the work site promoted a friendly rivalry between our youth groups. One said, "We'll make our house special. We'll build window boxes on the front of the house." And the other said, "We'll make our house special. We'll build shelves in the kitchen." Both wonderful ideas. But the rivalry began to get out of hand. Soon we were saying things like, "Well, we've raised 2 walls. Well, we've raised 4 walls." And on the last day, one of the team leaders had to rein it in. He stood up and said, "This is not a contest. We are not just building a house. We are building a home for a family. The goal is not to finish first, but to do our best to the glory of God." Or as Paul might say, we are God's servants, building for God, not for ourselves. Life does have a way of distracting us from working together for our common purpose. I recently heard the story about a company, some of you will know Patagonia. It makes outdoor equipment and clothing. The company's beginning was simple, single-minded in purpose. When he was in high school in California, Yvon Chouinard fell in love with rock climbing. All he wanted to do was climb. But when he started, the equipment was not the best. So he became a blacksmith for the sole purpose of making better equipment. He would make equipment in the off-season and climb in the summer, selling his equipment out of his car to support his climbing. He was making by hand the best equipment available. And little by little, it became a business, and he became known worldwide for the quality, craftsmanship of his work. On one trip to Scotland, he happened to pick up a rugby shirt that he thought would be good for climbing. Back in the 1960s, it didn't look like anything anyone in the United States would have been caught climbing in. So he got back to California, and people said, "Where can we get a shirt like that?" He ordered some from Scotland, and he started selling them out of his car with his other climbing equipment, and Patagonia became a clothing company. Soon his wife was making all kinds of things, and they were among those that introduced synthetic fibers and materials to the outdoor climbing community. Their business grew rapidly. Now, all along, their purpose was to make the most functional outdoor equipment. But then it became popular. They got caught up in the fad, and the business that grew rapidly came crashing down. The trend was over. On the brink of losing it all, Chouinard gathered his top team, and they went outdoors, out to the wilderness, to do some soul searching. What they decided was fascinating. They still wanted to make the best stuff because they wanted to use it when they climbed or hiked or camped. They wanted to keep working with their friends. They wanted to be able to have their families around the workplace and to take time off to go somewhere with their families and enjoy the outdoors. So they decided they needed to be smaller, to make less money, but to last longer. I take the time to tell the story because I think it's a wonderful example of people learning to work together for a common purpose. And when they got away from their common purpose, they lost what made them successful in the first place. When they reclaimed their common purpose, making the best, the most functional outdoor stuff, which they called it, success returned. As a church, we are in that sort of time of soul searching. As we go through our mission study this spring, we'll be seeking to clarify who we are as God's servants in this community. We'll be looking inward at the ministries of the church and outward into the community to identify the needs we are meeting already, as well as needs that we might meet in the future. Now, while we're in the process of dividing into task groups, Paul would caution us about taking sides and picking teams. The work ahead is not about getting what we want. According to Paul, the calling of the church is to be God's servants working together for the glory of God. Remembering that nothing we do matters unless we do it to show God's love in the world. Yesterday, I participated in a celebration of the life of Fred Long. Told a story that I'm compelled to retell today. Through the years, Fred and Glenda took many mission trips, and I talked to Fred about the many times he took trips with First Presbyterian Church. But he was taking trips long before he became Presbyterian. And recently, Glenda told me about an early trip they took with the Baptist Church to Brazil. They would go and lead Bible studies. They worked with people of all ages. They worked with the hearing impaired. The last trip to Brazil was a wonderful experience, and they were sad to leave. At the closing worship, there was a moment that was a highlight for them. As they sang together in Portuguese and in English, "To God be the glory, great things He has done." The hymn, "To God be the glory," is a statement of faith that Paul would encourage us to keep in mind in the days ahead. The hymn reminds us that God is the one who has done great things, not us. Our calling is but to serve God, working together in the world to show God's love to all. There are no sides to take, only one God to glorify. Thanks be to God.